So the only thing is, I want to try and get. There is people waiting outside.
Oh, bro, we just need to get the time.
Okay.
We'll leave.
Hi.
Are you booked?
I booked until 5:30, but we can always.
No, it's fine.
Yeah.
You booked until 5:30.
5:30.
Were the chairs out when you came in?
Yeah.
You put them back out?
Yeah, we will do. We were just talking about stuff and then we'll put them back out.
No worries. No,
Oh God.
Pen all over it.
That is a representation of what my mind sounds like.
It might be a long day, but on the 29th I might see if I can do 3:30 till 5. Because you're only available on Tuesdays, you're only available till 5, aren't you?
No, on Wednesdays.
On Wednesdays.
Yeah, Tuesdays I'm away.
Oh yeah, on Tuesdays you're fine.
Just on the 29th,
Yeah.
my mum is coming here from Croatia, so I will have to pick her up from the train station.
That's fine.
But other than that, I'm free.
That's absolutely fine. No, I'm not fussed about it. Because it'll be a long rehearsal. So I might just see if I can do maybe till 6. If that's okay?
Yeah.
On Tuesday? Yeah.
That's completely fine.
So I'm going to try and get an extra rehearsal in the creative lab. If you're not sure where the creative lab is, Sana, I can meet you here.
So where there?
No, it's the other building down that way. So if worse comes to worse, one of us can meet you up here and we'll walk you down.
Alright, yeah, that's fine.
So you just let us know. It's the 15th, but we're all in here anyway from 11 till 1. No, we're not in this room, we're in that room up there. From RS1 101 on the 15th, yeah.
It's all on the
Thank
group
you.
chat. Don't worry.
It's all on the group chat. All the main rehearsals from like 11 till 1, except from next week we are until 2 till 5.
Next week we're here.
The 8th, 2 till 5, we are in the room up there. The RS1 or 101, where your classes are usually.
Oh.
And from the rest of them, except from on the 15th, 2 till 5 p.m, we are in the creative lab down there. But just before,
If you could write in the group chat.
it is all in the group chat. It is all in the group chat. I put it in yesterday when we got told. If you're not sure where the creative lab, I will be going down that way to go meet Jen and that. I can show you where that is before you've got an hour between them two for like food and stuff.
But for next week is up there.
Yeah. The rest of the rehearsals, except from if I book any extra, will be up there in that room. I will be booking an extra rehearsal. I'll let you know once Jen has approved it for the creative lab on the 29th.
Don't do that.
I'm really sorry guys, but we're going to have to put all these chairs back.
The man asked us.
It's a man asked. I was just going to leave it. So I put our fucking rehearsal shop. But it's okay because the next lot is like 3-4 hour blocks. So we have to put all in rows. I think the longest day is the 15th where Imogen is doing a no-show.
It's not my fault.
It is your fault, Imogen.
No, I'm sorry.
I'm joking.
Blame Lola.
Blame Lola. I'm gonna send her a text message now, guys.
And be like, excuse
I'm
me,
blaming
I
you.
can't
Exactly.
believe you're on holiday. I'm meant to be in rehearsal and my director is having a go at me.
I will tell Lola that you all hate her.
I believe we'll be off.
What's the table like?
3 rows. I'm only doing 3 rows. I don't know how long they are.
Let's just put any out. Well,
We put them out, guys.
So when it changes, they can change it.
Yeah, if they need extra chairs, they can have extra chairs.
There's
Yeah,
many,
there's
many
a 3rd
chairs.
row, do 3 rows, and yeah. That's the only thing about having this room. I thought their class was at 11, that's why Jen put me in until 12:30.
I'm blaming Jen there.
Can't blame Jen because she actually gave me a room.
we can't blame Jen. Jen will kill us.
That's fine.
Jen is scary.
Okay,
Sometimes.
Yeah. We all love Jen.
With the costume, shall we try to go for next week? Shall we try to go to my room? If not, then I'll find one.
No, I'm thinking costume, probably. I want you rehearsing them as soon as I can, probably about 15 for the same time. But if you've got the costume and you want to work with the costume,
I've only got dresses because I normally wear dresses, but I was thinking if I could go and maybe wear something different,
Yeah.
if it would look suitable for
Like
me.
I said, if whatever you think is going to be like, she do a job, she'd be the oldest one.
If I
That's
wear
done
a
it, and he's
suit.
like, not even a suit, it's smart. Considering like when you go for like a job interview or you go for like a normal job.
Just a good one.
Yeah, something like that would be fine. If you want to start bringing stuff in and
I
working
can
it.
always send you a photo of it.
Yeah.
My phone case.
You can always, if you prefer to work in costume sooner rather than later, I'm not bothered. But by the 15th, we're probably going to try and get everyone in costume and everyone in costume.
If not, even the one I'm wearing.
I was like, oh yeah, that's a phone.
Yeah, that's
I
what
say
I
phone.
like.
It must be my stuff around here. Zoe left her stuff around here. Wonky lines. I showed them
Good.
online.
Yeah, I don't know.
And it was streamlined.
Awesome bit of networking.
Yeah, and what's his name again? Travis Ryan from Cattle Decapitate. You know, he's like 59 years
Hello.
old, really down to earth, really like interesting, fun guy.
Can I just do the usual?
Yeah, sure.
Hello, gorgeousness. Hello, how are you this morning?
This is great. She's like doubling as a therapy dog.
Oh, it's really nice. Take this all day long, can't we? Oh, yes, now then. Sweet little wiggies out. Yeah. Who's gorgeous? Who's gorgeous? Yes.
She might actually be clean the next time you see her.
Yeah.
Finally getting a groom this weekend.
Really?
Yeah. Took me a while to find someone.
So hyperallergenic, aren't they? When they're
Yeah, it's so
just
nice.
superb. My house is just full of dog hairs.
Oh gosh, yeah.
You've met my dogs, haven't you, Rich?
I don't know if I went inside the house and saw them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I don't know if he brought them up to the, maybe. Yeah.
So that's my colleague helping cross.
Oh, how beautiful.
Sky, and
Oh my
then-
goodness, what a combination.
Yeah, we actually got her with her sister, but we had Natch, you know, litter-mate syndrome. Have you heard of that? You're not supposed to
No.
get dogs from the same litter.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Do they just wreak havoc?
They fight each other for dominance.
Oh, no.
And because they're the same age and the same size, they're always looking for resources from the parents. They fight each other. And
Whoa.
if you don't split them up, they can literally kill each other.
Oh my god.
So we rehomed one, and after 6 months they forget that they're siblings. So that's what we did, and
Okay.
managed to rehome them with my partner's cousin, which was great.
Oh, good.
Um,
Oh, that's good. Yeah, I had no idea. You only hear the positives of puppy piles and
Yes.
how important it is that they're with their mom and their litter mates for as long as possible.
So this is, sorry to,
No,
this is
you do you.
unfortunate, Eric. These are on TRS.
So you were hoping, do you want me to call them, the texters back and ask for something else?
How do you get into the,
So, okay.
so is there a sound card down here?
The system I use, I'll show you my setup. I just plug in everything through this adapter. It might be your best solution to use mine. What I do is I just plug it in,
Yeah.
and then I plug in the sound, or this is how I plug in the slides to the computer, right? So I take the HDMI adapter. Let's see here. So this is.
And that takes your audio as well, does it?
It should, but I think last time I plugged the audio jack here into your laptop. Okay.
Right, okay, which would work, that would be
Yeah,
fine.
so we'll just test the setup and make sure it works. Yeah, here. There we
Okay.
go. So the only thing that's
Ava, I am so sorry. These speakers are poll inputs. They're not TRS. So we're just trying to work out how to get into them. So sorry, the TRS to XLR won't work. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry.
So I don't worry.
Have you seen on the back here there? You haven't got. So we're just trying to work out an alternative solution.
Yeah. And I might run up with you to grab a non-faulty version because mine is.
Of a dongle.
Yeah.
Or,
have a
I mean,
look.
I do have a HDMI out here. Is
Oh,
there
you
a
do?
quarter? Yeah.
Okay, yeah. If
Oh,
this,
I think the speakers are automatically
if that
connected
works,
To the HDMI,
I think they're connected to the computer, as far as I'm aware.
but I'm using my laptop.
Yeah, you can select a different audio input.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. Oh, great. So you won't have to worry about my thing. So the audio source.
Yep.
And not the PC,
Oh.
the HDMI. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know if that'll come out of.
Yeah.
Oh,
Try
you
it,
can
and if
aux.
not, we can do
Mark,
auxiliary.
you can. Yeah, I was gonna say you can aux into the.
Let's try an aux.
And it'll be-
That might be the.
That should.
simplest.
I think that will come out through the speakers because I think the speakers are connected in here.
Okay.
You can try it now though. I'm not sure.
Playback and
It's just this time of day.
I know.
Go to.
Oh yeah, that's how I'm waking up. You alright?
External headphones.
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Good.
All is well.
Always helps with the sun, you know.
I've got some options.
Honestly, I had a little bit of a sit in my car and just soaked it up. I got here early and sat in Sainsbury's,
And then where's the volume?
soaking it in.
Carefully saying because you will get
That's it, there we go.
Yeah, it's like a 2-hour thing. Yeah.
it's a hidden number plate. Because I've been done for it. So
I did ages ago, and now I've got into the habit of setting an alarm on the phone.
yeah.
Howdy, you alright?
How you doing?
I'm doing good.
We chatted a while ago, didn't we, about your project?
We did, yeah. I had a lot more like of a concrete idea about it. I was gonna, I had like the submission thing end of March. So I'll book a new round of chats and come down for that. But yeah, I'm excited about it. It's good.
That's all right. How about you? Yeah. Good to be here. Oh, awesome. Yes. Pretend I'm a real
There we go. So now your screen is
Awesome.
Hey, how are you? Pretty good. How are you? Good. How is everyone?
You know, I would love to hear that.
Yeah.
You just sneak in.
No, value it. You get thrown out into the independent scholar world and you've got no access to learning at all.
Yeah, I got just started here. I just forgot.
Anyway, that was such a good time.
Well, it was exactly that. Like,
Yeah,
anyway,
no,
I got a letter, 60 quid fine. Photos of it. And I thought, I think I've done it 3 times more as well.
Yeah.
So I paid the fine straight away. And I just emailed them and said, look, you just started doing this. Go, I think I might have done it again. Yeah, I'm looking at it. How nice is that?
That's handy.
Yeah.
All right.
I thought, well, what can happen is to say no, you know, and I'll pay the fine anyway. But it actually wrote off. Definitely 2, possibly 3.
Because if it's 3 and you were staying for like a few hours, it's probably an alright rate, honestly. To suggest that.
Well, I don't know, it's 60 quid for 3 hours, isn't it?
Oh, I thought they half it. That's half.
No, that was
that
if
was
you paid
half.
it down.
Oh, okay. Never mind. That's like London prices then.
The thing is, you know, you can go and talk to someone who's got stuff to do now.
Yeah,
I had that with the old gym that I was at, and it was because I put in, I like just backfilled an extra digit into my reg when you go in, and they were like, yeah, because I guess that's their like business model, right?
Yeah, well, anything is not perfect. In charge of it. I think those machines are terrible because I've seen like if the sun shines straight onto the screen, you can barely see what it's just position.
Honestly, I probably could walk down, but I'm in like a little routine of like come straight from where the gym that I'm at in the morning, straight here, and it just kind of feels nice.
Yeah, we get used to it.
I guess if I'm on the for an hour.
Parking out the bottom of the if you just kind of walking through the campus out to the bottom, there's 2 NCP cars, £4 a day. It's not, but if you hear it that fast.
I think that one specifically makes me feel more guilty because if you walk up the hill that's next to it, my house is basically there.
Okay, yeah.
Because I'm already in the car anyway. The closer I park to my house, the more the guilt piles up on me. So I have to park further away, even though I'm doing the same thing. Yeah, for the sake of my. I feel so good about that one.
Saving gym fees.
Yeah, I know, it would be great. It'd be so fit.
It's a good crowd.
I don't know. Maybe it's acoustics. It's for the acoustics to absorb more of the sound. Do you want a hand?
Are we expecting a big crowd?
No.
So yeah, as I was.
No, I'm just
setting up for the rest of the day.
As I'm a lecturer, I know what it's like to come into a room with a complete chaos. And you're supposed to start a lecture and you've got 50 students to come in.
Yeah.
So while I thought about it, the people in the previous session had just piled all the chairs at the back. And I said to them when I came in earlier, can you please put them all back out? And they put about a third of it out. Which is what people do, which frankly,
It's one of simultaneously true things.
Yeah.
So that's more or less all of them anyway. Maybe it was fine and then they just got
right? And yeah, exactly. Complicated, right? You're like, wait a second, how do I feel about this? Yeah, and
you on the PhD?
No, I'm Master's Biology.
Oh, fun. Okay. What's it in? Alright. How spatial? Or just conceptually? The spiral?
Yeah,
thing?
yeah, okay. When I'm here, I'm in there.
You composing for it? Or the mix?
I will. So far, I've just been learning.
Yeah, I guess that's good.
Well, a bit more than that. I've been using, I've got an ambisonic mic, which has got 19 captures.
There's the socio-political side to this.
So I've been using some gigs I've recorded just to return me to play. You know, rather than worrying about thinking about my own creativity. I'll just use that. Don't really care what it is. To export the systems.
That almost sounds like if you've got 19 inputs into the mic, and it's what, 27?
25.
20? Yeah, that seems harder than doing it with like turning the stereo into a.
Well, so I did a couple of things. I did one gig which I got those 19 channels from the mic, and I got a load of stuff off the desk as well, direct. So I used the close mic for the floor level speakers. And it just,
I forget that it's got vertical stuff.
It's 3 rings of 8 and 1 in the ceiling.
Yeah.
So I used that to rebuild the floor and just use the ambisonic and fill the sky into it.
How obvious is the vertical panning?
Okay.
If it's
Really?
Not, if it's not there.
It's 10:33, so let's get going. Thanks for the prompt.
Nice.
I've known Mark for quite some time. I met Mark in 2014 at the Grimposium in Montreal.
Hell yeah.
And I believe, Mark, you were present a few years later in Victoria, 2017 as well, for another conference. And that's where I got to know Mark not just as a towering figure, literally and figuratively, but also as a wonderful storyteller as well. And I've got his bio here for cheat sheets. He is a university teaching fellow in music technology and production here at the University of Huddersfield, and wears multiple hats. A live music engineer, record producer, engineer, mix and mastering engineer with, get this, his studio, Mynett Productions. I personally enjoy that kind of cleverness. He has an extensive career as a professional musician as well, with 6 worldwide commercial album releases with his band Kill to This, which I think dates back to around 2000.
Yeah.
Your band, yeah. And that, along the way with working with renowned producers Colin Richardson and, correct my pronunciation, but Andy Sneak. Okay. And several years of high-profile touring in Europe. I personally own a copy of his book, Metal Music Manual, which he released 9 years ago now, in 2016, which is the first book on producing, engineering, mixing, mastering modern metal music. He is a fellow of the Higher Education Academy, has a PhD in engineering, producing, and mixing contemporary metal. So let's enjoy Mark's presentation.
Thank you, Eric. Thanks for coming down. So what I'm talking about today is a project I'm involved with called Organic Metal, and it's obviously it's partly about metal music, and I'll start a little bit just contextualizing metal music because it's relevant to the pipe organ. But what's relevant to my presentation today is there's probably like 4 or 5 different aspects that I want to talk about. So what I'll do is I'll just start talking about metal music and a fundamental understanding of metal music. And my hope there is that it's going to present a link with pipe organs, because most people think that they're very disparate, that they wouldn't work together. But that's actually not the case, and I'll hopefully explain why that's the case. So I'll talk about metal music, talk about pipe organs historically and their relevance to culture in the UK, and then talk about how these 2 very different worlds come together, and then talk about some of the surrounding subjects that have arisen from the project. So first of all, I'll just talk a little bit about metal music. Heaviness is metal music's defining feature. Myself and fellow academic here at Huddersfield, Jan Hertz, have just finished a project on heaviness in metal music production. But importantly, this is the first thing that I want to say, is that while textures, dynamics and performance styles often vary, I often ask this, Pete, you know, if I was to ask any of you, what is the one quality of metal music without which it wouldn't be metal music? People often say volume or guitars or loudness, but it's actually harmonic distortion. And although there's lots of other qualities, I don't know, Radiohead's Creep has got distorted guitars, but we don't associate it as metal. It's obviously a lot more than just distorted guitars. That's the fundamental quality of metal music. And there are academics like Keith Carn-Harris, if memory serves, has done studies on metal music that doesn't have distorted electric guitars.
Is there such a thing?
Yeah, well, I think you know a little bit about this, do you, Owen, if I remember rightly?
Yeah, I'd say you're right, because there's other stuff that you can talk about as metal, but it's only you have to qualify it as why it's still metal, even though it doesn't have.
Right.
I would say. Yeah.
Broadly speaking, so there's music with lots of distortion in that sounds like it's got the texture of metal music. And there's a bit of a debate on whether people call it metal music, and probably not there to speak about that today, but it's an interesting subject. So for most people, if a group's sound does not contain this vital quality, it's unlikely that the music would be classified as metal. And at this stage of the genre's development, there are no other sound or performance attributes that are a prerequisite for the metal band moniker to be applicable and valid. So given that, in looking at harmonic distortion, this is something interesting about harmonic distortion. We have, as humans, we have an innate experience of distortion from being a very young age. And we associate distortion with loudness and with emotion. And this is not a result of amplification, but from us being literally a few hours old, the limitations of our hearing system and vocal cords. When we overload our vocal capabilities, we get distortion. If I was to scream at the top of my voice now, you'd hear distortion. same with a baby. But also our human hearing, you let off a shotgun next to your ears and you will hear distortion. So as human beings, we associate distortion with loudness and emotion, but as we get older, we learn to love distortion, and as the academic writer who wrote a book called Sound Effects says, he says, if there's distortion, something exciting is happening somewhere. And so, you know, distortion these days, it's all over dance music, it's on, you know, hip-hop music, drill music, and it's become a real staple for so many other genres rather than metal music. But regardless of listening level involved, connotations from the primary nature of heaviness are central to the appeal that metal has had. So just from that perspective, this is a visualization of pretty much every piece of music we'd consider metal music. So this is an FFT, a fast Fourier transform of a clean guitar, and there's three aspects that I want to highlight, one of which is the dynamics, the changes between the peak and kind of like the peaks and the troughs of the sound, and then two areas I've highlighted in the box there. And this is just an electric guitar plugged straight into a play amplifier, just recording what's coming out of the electric guitar. This is what happens when we add harmonic distortion to it. So this is an appropriate level of distortion for this style of rhythm sound. So what we'll do firstly is just look at the dynamics at the top there, and you'll see that once it's distorted, it's not compression, but it's a compression-like effect. And the peaks and troughs have become a lot more condensed. And so that adds to a consistent sense of power. But also what you'll see, if we just look at the two dotted areas, we just start at the lower one, what you'll see if we've got all of this harmonic content. So just to be clear, the areas in red demonstrate harmonic content, frequency content. And as you'll see in the lower range, in the low frequencies, this is all the way down from 20 hertz up to 120 hertz. When the guitar sound is clean, there's very, very little there. And as soon as it's distorted, and this is something that I'll talk a little bit about, but I'm not going to talk too much about because it's a little bit geeky. It's something called resultant tones. Before I talk about that, I'll just talk about the high frequency content is here as well. And what you'll see is that on the clean sound, it really does roll away up there. There's very little in this upper frequency box. The upper frequency box here is from roughly 1.5 to about 7.5K. The area that we associate with brightness. You'll see with the clean sound, there's not much content there. As soon as it's distorted, that brightness, that aggression, that sense of proximity, and also the lower frequency content. And this is what's fascinating about harmonic distortion, is it actually generates frequencies and tones that are not there in the original signal. And it actually generates frequencies lower than the fundamental frequency of the guitar, which is absolutely fascinating. So what you'll see here, this guitar is tuned down to C, which has got a fundamental frequency of 55 hertz, but you'll see frequencies going much lower than 55 hertz. And this is to do with when you get more than one note, two or more notes playing together, you get these resultant tones, and it's literally adding the frequencies together and subtracting the frequencies. I'll not talk too much about it because I've got quite a lot to go through, but it's a fascinating phenomenon. And then you can see these areas that I've highlighted here with resultant tones, and it becomes really complicated. It adds more frequencies, and those frequencies become subject to harmonic distortion. And that's why when you listen to guitars, even very, very quiet, if I play some electric guitars here and just turn them right down, they still sound loud. They sound loud and powerful. And that's all to do with the experiences of being human. And if you ever get a chance to look into it, the more I looked into human hearing and head-related transfer functions, it's absolutely fascinating how we experience the world as humans with the way we perceive sound and direction and depth is absolutely fascinating. That's very, very relevant to the pipe organ. So what I'll just do, I'll just move on a little bit away from harmonic distortion. That's a fast Fourier transform of a kick drum. I won't speak too much about that, but with a kick drum, I will just a little bit.
Yeah.
So we've got, this is the problem with modern music, and this is the problem with metal music, is that the drums are what we refer to as impulse-based. So an impulse is something that comes in and dies very, very quickly. And what you'll see here is that you'll see that the electric guitar initially was impulse-based. You'll see these strong onsets, and then it decays very quickly. But then when you look at the harmonically distorted guitar sound, you'll see it sustains. And there's this problem with modern music is that the drums are the foundation of modern music. You know, we generally consider modern music to be Elvis Presley onwards, but the heartbeat of modern music is obviously the drums. But the drums are impulse-based, which means that they, as you can see here, this is an FFT of a kick drum, very sharp onset and decays very quickly. So they're impulse-based and they're acoustic signals, on top of which we place sustain-based electric signals. Sustain-based electric guitars, bass, keyboards, and for those impulse-based acoustic signals to punch through that dense wall of sound is actually quite challenging. And that's something that's really interesting with metal music, is there's this real emphasis on gaining clarity, because it's very difficult to gain clarity, and that's something that I'll cycle back to a little bit later on. So this is just in summing up harmonic distortion. Normally more overtones are produced when instruments are played harder than when they are played less hard. All of us in the room now, even with our eyes closed, you have an idea of the energy involved in the performance event. If I was to do this, you have an idea of what's involved with that, whereas if I do this, even if they were the same loudness, you get an idea of the energy involved in the performance event. It's the same with drums. If we took a snare drum, and we got Loz to kind of like go in the studio and really hit the snare drum really hard, and then take another recording of the snare drum just tapped quite lightly, and then balance them up so that they were the same perceptual loudness through LUFS, a loudness reading that we've got. The one that Loz has hit harder would still sound a lot louder, because there's all of these psychoacoustic clues that lets us know that snare drum's been hit harder. There's all of these overtones. Well, that's what's happening with harmonic distortion with electric guitars. I'll come back to the relevance of pipe organs in a moment. So the strengthening of the lows, the energy construction in the highs results in sounds perceived as louder than it actually is. And with increased sound level, human hearing is more sensitive to the extremes of the audio spectrum. Something called Fletcher-Munson theory, which again I won't go into now, but as music gets louder, we perceive the low frequencies and the high frequencies a lot better. And that's what loudness buttons on stereos used to do. They just used to boost the lows and the highs, you know, as we perceive it higher, at a greater loudness level. But that's what happens naturally with harmonically distorted electric guitars. You naturally get the low frequencies and the high frequencies. And there's this analogy that I've used, that the harmonically distorted rhythm guitars create this dense wall of sound. So moving on to the pipe organ then. I'll talk a little bit about pipe organ in the UK, and then sort of start discussing how these sort of two worlds have come together. So pipe organs produce sounds by forcing air through pipes of various sizes and materials. I must mention this. My love of pipe organs was from the age of 8 years old, and my dad took me to Liverpool Cathedral for a pipe organ recital, and I had no idea. I'd not been to my first gig yet. My first gig was a band called Thin Lizzy back in the day. This is in the early 1830s, when I was young, and I'd not really experienced
the late stuff.
Absolutely. I'd not really experienced that much music at this point, and so I just went with my dad to Liverpool Cathedral, and I just remember sitting down and the pipe organ playing Toccata and Fugue, and it was literally like my face was just almost like pinned back in the pew. The impact, I mean, it's an instrument the size of a house, and it's got this capability of making the sound of a whole orchestra just from one instrument. It's an amazing instrument. It's incredibly versatile. It's incredibly powerful. Unbelievably powerful. I mean, if you want to listen to heavy music, listen to Bach. You know, that's really, really heavy music. So it's a fascinating instrument. So the pipes are typically made of wood or metal, and each one corresponds to a specific pitch. The air or wind is provided by a blower or bellows, which is controlled by a set of keyboards known as manuals, and a set of pedals operated by the feet. And as I just mentioned, the organ's complexity allows it to produce a wide range of sounds, from deep resonant tones in the lower registers to bright, piercing notes in the higher ones, making it capable of mimicking the timbre of an entire orchestra. A little bit back to human hearing. That's what's fascinating about human hearing. Like, we've got two speakers here on a horizontal plane. So why do we perceive music with height dimension? Like, if I was to play Massive Attack's Angel now, it goes from the really low lows to really high highs. In fact, let's quickly do it. And what we'll do, you will perceive this music as, so let's go, really significant in the height dimension. And it starts off, and we've got this, just make sure it's playing through, there we go. And you'll perceive this with height.
That's part of the song now.
Yes. It's a new remix. So you've got that high frequency going on. Hopefully you're perceiving there that you can hear the low lows, and we perceive it with height information. And again, it comes back to how we experience the world as humans. So humans can perceive from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. As you get older, you lose your high frequencies. But one wavelength of 20 hertz is 17 meters long. That's probably, I don't know, probably greater than the width of this room. And the relevance of that is, let me put it another way. If you're in Huddersfield and you're 2 blocks away from the parish, and you can hear that there's a gig going on, you can hear that there's music going on, what do you hear?
Right, low.
Yeah. Absolutely. The reason for that is that these low frequencies go straight through brick walls. Literally, they can reach us from great distances. They're incredibly powerful. They're very hard to control. They bend round objects, go straight through brick walls. They also have another impact on us, and that is tactile transduction. It's why we love live music, is we don't just hear frequencies, we feel frequencies. So you go to a gig and you'll feel that kick drum in your chest. High frequencies can't do that. High frequencies, so 20 hertz, 17 meters long, 20 kilohertz is 1.7 centimeters. That can't resonate our chest cavity. They come directly to our ears. So that's the first thing about being human, is we feel the low frequencies coming through the floor as vibrations. If anybody's been to the Ritz in Manchester, it's mounted on car tyres, and you'll feel the vibration of music through your feet. It's awesome. You feel the kick drum in your chest. High frequencies don't do that. They come directly to your ears. So we, as humans, we start perceiving low frequencies and high frequencies. And with the pipe organ, this incredible depth of frequencies from the lows to the highs is married up with the visuals of the pipe organ, which is this huge instrument in usually a very, very large building. So that just talks a little bit about the extent of pipe organs from a conceptual perspective about physicality and sound, matching up with metal music. Metal music is a lot about power. It's a lot about impact. It's a lot about live, is that physical feeling of feeling music. And a lot of that is very similar to pipe organs. Like there's a kind of rock band called Ghost, and their current stage set involves all of these these stained glass windows behind the stage. Well, pipe organs are in buildings where there's stained glass windows everywhere. So there's something interesting there about the aesthetics of metal music: power, depth, dimension, physicality, tactile transduction, and metal music. And I think the point I'm trying to make is that there's probably a greater link between metal music and pipe organs than many people would think. There's been some interesting reactions about this project, which I'll probably get a chance to talk about, but I think it's important to say that there's a lot more links between them than many people would think. Very, very briefly then, the origins of the pipe organ date back to ancient Greece with the hydraulis, which was a water-powered organ being one of the earliest forms. However, as we know, the modern pipe organ evolved significantly in medieval and Renaissance Europe. So the Renaissance was sort of the Middle Ages is kind of classed as 500 AD to 1500 AD, then the Renaissance was generally considered after that, and then the Baroque period, especially 1600 to 1750, pipe organ became a highly sophisticated instrument, essentially in both church and concert settings. And in the UK, the pipe organ became a central feature in religious and ceremonial life. Its role in cathedrals and churches was crucial. The organ's status grew as an instrument of spiritual and social significance throughout the Renaissance and Baroque eras, with composers such as J.S. Bach, Handel writing some of the most important works for the instrument. Then the Victorian era happened, organ builders such as Henry Willis. In fact, we've got a Father Willis organ at Huddersfield Town Hall. And then in 1871, Royal Albert Opera Hall opened, home to one of the most famous organs in the world, further cementing the instrument's place in British cultural life. And it's obviously got a huge role with British composers. Benjamin Britten's, I think it was called War Requiem, if I remember rightly, was performed in cathedrals and concert halls across the UK. It's also been used in film music and radio broadcasts. In fact, Hans Zimmer's, if you've ever heard the soundtrack to his Interstellar film, that was recorded at St Mary Redcliffe in Bristol, and they had the release party there. It's a phenomenal, really phenomenal instrument. Obviously, the pipe organ has had a really lasting impact on British culture. Its association with churches and cathedrals made it a symbol of spirituality and tradition. Its majestic sound has shaped the experience of religious and state occasions, royal weddings, state funerals. Beyond its ceremonial use, it's influenced a wide range of musical genres, from classical to contemporary music, lots of British composers mentioned here. And in summary, the pipe organ has played a central role in the musical and cultural history of the UK. Its development from early beginnings in Greece to its period through the Baroque and Victoria periods has shaped the country's musical landscape. The organ's association with religious observance, national events and concert music has left a lasting legacy in both the sacred and secular spheres of British life, and we are sleepwalking towards losing all of that, because 4 pipe organs a week go to landfill in this country.
Landfill? That's wild.
4 a week. And we just sleepwalking. There's an organisation called Pipe Up for Pipe Organs. Have you seen the documentary, Jeff?
Yeah. It's great, where they relocate them, and there's that one up in County Durham somewhere, the old lady. It's heartbreaking, some of it.
It really is heartbreaking.
But then they're getting repurposed in different communities. One of them came down to a Afro-Caribbean Christian community. It was great.
Oh, you heard about that?
Yeah, that was in another thing. I think that was in the documentary, I can't remember. Or maybe it was something else I saw, but yeah.
Because I heard that story, and David Pipe, the pipe organist, so I heard this wonderful story. I might have this slightly wrong, because he told me this quite a few years ago, but it was a church in Suffolk that the pipe organ, beautiful church, literally the church was closing down. We've had 3,500 churches closed down in the UK since in the last 10 or 12 years, and there's another 800 or 900 at risk register. And I'll just make this small point here: regardless of your thoughts about religion or Christianity, those venues and those churches need to stay central to serving the community. And so Sir Michael, what's his name from?
Palin.
Thank you. So Michael Palin is kind of like spearheading this, and he's basically saying churches need to serve the local community. They need to be warm hubs, they need to be food hubs, they need to be centres of cultural life, and particularly for the disadvantages and disadvantaged communities, where people can feel a sense of unity and connectedness and people who are lonely, and I really agree with those sentiments, because what else do you do with them? Do they just get mothballed and turned into apartments? These are really valuable parts of our cultural heritage. And so I heard this really interesting story that Jeff's alluding to, where this church in Suffolk closed down. They literally gave their pipe organ to a community centre, and I think it was in Brixton. I can't remember, but pipe organ goes to this community centre in Brixton, and people go to this community centre in Brixton now, and there's like 7-year-old Caribbean kids tearing up the pipe organ because they've played it since they were at the age of 4, and I love that story. But interestingly, like I say, pipe organs, it's a different story in France, it's a different story in Germany. They are not to anywhere near the extent of the UK sleepwalking. There are other sides of the story, like York Minster got a £2 million refurbishment. Most pipe organs cost around £100,000 to service, because it literally means taking all of the pipes apart and cleaning them internally and then reconstructing them. So there is a significant...
Well, and if you want, someone else wants it to take it to that place, you can have this organ for free, but it's going to cost you thousands and thousands of pounds to get it there and then reassemble, take it down, get it there, and reassemble it. That's the problem. I mean, but our one,
I was just about to say
the same issue, but I think that one that you're talking about from Suffolk, I'm actually thinking there was a different one. So I think it's quite a common thing that essentially where Christianity is still going strong, which tends to be in other different communities to the older communities that have been established here. That's where there is still a market for those organs, right. Because otherwise, I guess even if you turn the church becomes more like a community centre, they won't necessarily want an organ and have the funds to maintain it. So that still remains a problem, doesn't it?
If they've got a roof that's letting rain in, where do they spend the money? Yeah. So it is a problem. But what's your understanding of where our pipe organ went from here?
Well, it was going to go to a church.
Yeah.
And I think my understanding is it did go, but I don't think it didn't go or something. I don't know where it is now.
It's all in bits,
right.
Is what I got told, and it's not been put together and not used.
But we did have someone who took it and was going to have it, and something went wrong. I don't know.
The one from Phipps.
Yeah.
Wasn't their space not big enough or something in the end?
Something along those lines.
Or there was some. It turned out there was some fundamental problem with.
Yeah.
I don't know why they didn't think of that before.
No, I know.
I mean, to be fair, that organ was donated to us from someone who. It's obviously a replica. It's not an original organ, and it was donated to us by Mr. Phipps, which is why it's called Phipps Hall. We didn't actually ask for it.
Oh, right.
He said, "Oh, by the way,
but you've got to have the organ."
Yeah, no, he did. He just said, "Do you want this organ?" And some of the staff members at the time said they couldn't really. They thought, "Well, we can't possibly refuse an amazing free Baroque organ." Although, of course, it did cost thousands of pounds to get it put in.
Right.
And it didn't get a huge amount of use, because actually the trouble with Phipps is it's too dry.
Right.
And I know it's only a Baroque organ; it's not designed for a massive space.
Yeah.
It does sound quite dry when it was played in there. I mean, that had some advantage for recording, but actually not really.
Right.
So it didn't really ever get the use. So it's a shame that it's not gone to somewhere that could actually use it properly yet. Maybe, but I mean, yeah, it was one of those things that actually was sort of appeared in the space after I thought, oh, there's suddenly an organ appeared in there, because we were in the building, it wasn't there.
Really?
And then it appeared, and it was a bit like, I'm not 100% sure about this thing, but we got used to it. But yeah, and then it went. But it wasn't played much.
Who is Phipps?
He's a rich person. Okay. It was in his house.
Right.
I'll just say that much.
Okay.
I mean, working in his house.
He's an organ donor.
His house.
There it is.
Yes. The reason I say that is I never went to his house, but he must have had a bit more than a semi-detached.
A bit more.
Yeah, but that's why it's called Phipps Hall.
Right. Okay.
Because we I don't think he demanded that, but I think it was seen as a nice thing to do.
Can we rename it now as X?
I don't know about X.
No Phipps.
Speak to Rupert.
Yes. So, just staying on the subject of pipe organs, so I've talked about this, hopefully explained what I see as the link between many of the aesthetics of metal music and pipe organs. And again, that's the sense of depth and dimension and sonic impact, weight, sonic weight, all of those aspects. But this is another reason. There's what I talked about with electric guitars earlier, which is resultant tones, which is frequencies that don't exist in the original instrument. It happens with pipe organs as well. And that's just a little bit about how organs, this new tone appears, even though they're not directly played by the pipe. So this resultant tone arises from the interaction, same as electric guitars, between the fundamental frequencies of two pipes. It's typically an intermediate frequency. For example, when a low frequency pipe and a higher frequency pipe together, you get summative tones, you get additive and subtractive frequencies. So add those frequencies together and subtract those frequencies and you get another frequency below the fundamental of the instrument. There are other instruments where you get sympathetic vibrations like violins, where you do get resultant tones, but not to the extent of the pipe organ. So what I'll just do is just listen to a pipe organ within this setting, and then I'll just demonstrate the sort of sonic signature between electric guitars and pipe organs. That very rich sound, very thick. And if you then listen to electric guitars playing, so I'll just play the pipe organs one more time. Let's play it from there. Hopefully what you're hearing there is a degree of sort of, what would you say, synchronicity between the sound. The harmonic structure of the pipe organ with those resultant tones. The guitar's sound is different, it's probably a little bit brighter due to the harmonic distortion there, but there's this way that they blend together. It presents challenges because of the density of the sound, and that is a challenge that we're solving for York with Andrew Bourbon, who's leading the sonics for the York Minster gig. But it does create a very dense wall of sound. When you put it all together, so starting with the pipe organ, adding the electric guitar, then adding bass, put it all together and you get, let's turn that down a little. This very, very powerful sound. There are real challenges within that sound though, and it's something called masking. It's the ability of certain sounds to mask, obscure other sounds. Because the pipe organ is so incredibly powerful, and so the electric guitars, and then you start adding bass into the equation, a sort of a typical bass sound generally involves a sound along these lines that does involve distortion in the bass. You add that to the drums. And that distortion, so you've now got harmonic distortion with the pipe organ, harmonic distortion with the electric guitars, harmonic distortion with the bass, and they all obscure each other. They're all fighting for prominence, and they're like naughty children that you need to make them play nicely. And to do that, you've got to divide them up and divide up the frequency spectrum, and it is actually quite a challenge. And the way that I've managed to get it to work here, that's a recording at Huddersfield Town Hall with David Pipe, who's the pipe organist with the project, is to heavily attenuate the mids in the guitars that leave space. It's almost like a sonic jigsaw. You've got to carve up the pieces of that jigsaw to make them all fit together. And it is actually quite challenging, particularly when I come back to this idea that I briefly mentioned earlier about these impulse-based acoustic signals, on top of which we've now got these really powerful sustained-based signals. You know, the pipe organ is super powerful. So we've got a real challenge there. The other challenge that we've got is, as Jeff rightly points out, is that there are acoustics that are effective at, would you say, translating the pipe organ, which is quite lively acoustics that adds to this, to reflections and a sense of dimension. That natural reverb with the pipe organ is very sympathetic.
Yeah. I mean, if you hear a pipe organ, like that pipe organ in Phipps, sounded a bit lifeless in a way. I mean, it had a nice sound, but it just died. The sound dies away too quickly. And the big, I mean, even smaller pipe organs, I think they rely on the reverberation of the space because they're perceived mostly as solo instruments or maybe with a choir, as people singing, and that's it. Yeah. And they're not really. I mean, there are pieces written for them with a pipe organ and orchestra or whatever, but they're always done in this big reverberant space. And of course, orchestras don't mind big reverberant spaces as long as the reflections aren't too unpleasant. Yeah. But obviously, once you get amplified music, then big reverberant spaces with amplified music, as you know, are deeply problematic. There's ways around it, but in St Paul's, for example, I've heard people try and do. Not your thing, but ages ago there was some more rock stuff, and I don't think they used the organ. It doesn't really matter, but it's really difficult. I mean, it just I found it quite unpleasant because all you end up with is a big soup floating around the upper parts of the building, and everything just sort of that's it. And there's two ways to go. You either go really quiet, which obviously doesn't work necessarily for rock music, or you go really loud. Perhaps that solves it. I'm not a technician in that area, but I mean, one thing I would. Sorry, I was getting into it, but one thing that immediately struck me about what you were saying there was we were talking about the bass. My immediate question would be, well, why not have a slightly different type of bass? But is it because metal basses, no, we've got to have that as our metal bass. Why not just take all that top end off and just have a deeper bass? Because then when it's all blended together, you don't have to then do that by sculpting it with the...
No, and the reason is that it then, as a texture, it's too different to the guitars. And you just can't put it in the mix because it's so different than the guitars that it sounds out of context. It's such a good question because once it's so clean, it's almost like a level 42 kind of like clean bass sound, and you try and put it there, and it sounds so out of context. And as soon as you just add some harmonic distortion into it, it just blends with the guitars a lot better.
And then you've got to deal. But then you've got to deal.
And then you've got to deal with the problem.
There's no perfection, is there?
No, and you know the. So the project that I'm involved with are playing York Minster on the 25th of April, and the reverb timing there is like there's going to be 6 performances going on by the time it's bounced off the ceiling and all of the walls, and it is a real problem. And the way that we're going about solving this problem is kind of as Jeff alluded to, which is lower volume levels, but instead of having just a PA at the front and having it one point source that has to fill the whole of the cathedral, we're having multiple speakers, so speakers on every pillar down the cathedral, and then speakers for the side aisles as well. And by doing that, there's less emphasis on them having to fill every seat, and so that the speakers are a little bit quieter.
Do you not get insane phase having loads of speakers?
You do, but you time delay them. So there's a time delay.
Gee, all right.
between
No,
them.
that's smart. Okay.
So it becomes, and then obviously you're a musician, you know about this. So the band, there's going to be no speakers on stage whatsoever. There's no acoustic drums. We've got a hopefully arriving soon, a very high standard electronic drum kit, because the acoustics of the drums are just so loud that you just can't control it. It's just going to create so much reverb. So then we have an electronic drum kit, we have amp modelers with the guitars and the bass. And so the only microphones on stage are going to be for the string quartet, the backing vocalist, and
didn't mention
Just add another any of those.
We're up for a challenge. There's also
the didgeridoo.
Yeah, there's a Steinway piano there as well, and we've got 3 backing vocalists, and so yeah, it's we're up for a challenge. It's going to be fun. And then there's no, the other aspect is that there's no monitors on stage. Again, to control, we're all playing on in-ear monitors, IEMs, which provides more control for Andrew to be able to control everything. And hopefully, with all that lot, it will be. The interesting problem is, just briefly, the part that I just played there is what we're opening the gig with. But then we've got faster tracks that are like 200 BPM, and they're just going to turn to I'm fairly sure it's just going to turn to an absolute mush. The initial gig that we did when we trialled this project was at Huddersfield Town Hall, a concert called Organic Doom, and it was a doom band it's a genre of metal music that's very, very slow. Lots of space for sustain of the pipe organ and lots of space for the reverb. And it did work, but we did have some real problems. I remember turning up to hear David play the pipe organ, he was playing Toccata and Fugue, and I'm stood in the middle of Huddersfield Town Hall going, how do I get a rock band above this? It was so loud and so powerful. And of course, the band turned up, plugged in their amps, and started playing the drums and completely drowned out the pipe organ. And we actually had to mic up the pipe organ to get some of that through the PA. Yeah,
that's
I know.
Wild.
Well, I've done that in the past actually. I did a piece years ago, it's nothing to do with that, but with electronics and pipe organ in St Paul's.
Really?
And I just put a couple of mics near it, and it just helped, and then that came out the speakers a little bit as well. And honestly, it was only subtle, but it made a huge difference.
Aren't the notes all coming from different places?
They
So
are.
some
You're
notes would be
absolutely right.
louder?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, and that's where it becomes challenging. But
we put it quite a way back. We didn't try and
you
spot
can
mark it.
mic up the back of a pipe organ, which is something that will do, and then you get more clean. But you're absolutely right. There's different notes. But as Jeff says, if you're only just reinforcing it a little
Just
bit,
pull it back and just
Get
general-
88
it just helps it
PCMs
blend.
in all of the... Yeah.
that'd be a research project, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Expensive.
It begs the question about composition to some degree, doesn't it? In terms of the spaces and this whole idea,
Yeah.
is that really it would, in the longer term, it might be worth, thinking about, well, what kind of pieces are we going to write and play as a band that's
Very
actually going
much.
to work in this situation?
Very much.
Slower ones, ones that perhaps have more space
Absolutely.
built in rather than a wall of noise
Yeah.
approach all the time sort of thing. I don't
Yeah,
know.
that is that. Interestingly, Jeff, that's exactly what we've done with that first song. He's gone, okay, let's write something that's really slow and sort of majestic and have space for the pipe organ. So that is something that we're doing. But it's interesting. There's a lot of challenges to solve. But what I do love is the impact from the first one we did, the Organic Doom gig at Huddersfield Town Hall, and then we did a gig in St Paul's here, and you got a range, and this is genuinely something that I enjoyed, is it was cross-generational. We had 8 to 88. That was the age range of both of the gigs. We had the Huddersfield Town Hall Organ Society turn up, and there was this guy that's a regular of the Organ Society who went to the merch stand and bought all of the vinyl, and he loved it, and he'd never heard metal in it, or never been exposed to it, and it was like, I only came down just to see what it was like. I didn't think I'd like it, but I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And then I heard another story, which was that a load of people who were metalheads who'd been to see the gig went to the next pipe organ recital at Huddersfield Town Hall. And I really liked that. That was something that I was sort of quite pleased about. And it's because it's this idea of bringing a pipe organ that's this traditional instrument, presenting it in a modern context and providing it with value and valuing it and actually going, this is an incredibly versatile instrument that we're recontextualizing in modern music. There has been, some of you might know about this, there's been a little bit of controversy about us playing York Minster from...
Oh, that was you, is it? Yes,
yeah.
It's made the news, isn't it, a little bit?
Yeah, quite a bit, like the Guardian. It's
I was thinking, I hadn't put it together with that was you.
Yeah.
I thought it was some horrible Satanist or something.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. No, it's actually, it's a really tenuous link. Two members of the band that I'm in were in a band called, they were session musicians in a band called Cradle of Filth, who had a deliberately provocative T-shirt that somebody picked up on from the congregation, complained about it to the Guardian. The Guardian wrote the story, and
good publicity then.
Well, interesting to say that we sold 800 tickets in 7 minutes. So, but it has been quite. It's caused myself and Charlotte have been involved. So Charlotte's a metal academic study, but also is a Christian, studies Christian music and the link between the two, and has sort of like looked at that intersection of those two worlds, and it has provoked some really, really interesting conversations because it's incredibly polarising. We've had a church in Sheffield that's called Metal Methodist, who basically the youth band are all metal. It's a metal band, and they've got like really buoyant numbers. And this, the minister gets on. He's got long hair and kind of like a big beard and loves his metal, and he's really open-minded and really embracing. And, depending on your point of view, it's something that's interesting about, well, what isn't that the ministry of what Jesus was about? It was about people kind of like bringing new people in. It's about, so you would think that the church, and there's something else here, so I'll credit Charlotte with this, and it became a centrepiece of when I was defending the gig, is all the way through church music, there are composers whose works or lifestyle were completely contrary to the church. And you can just take, for example, he was a renowned anti-Semite, believed that Christianity was to do with the downfall of European civilization, but nobody would think at all, would even blink an eye at hearing his music in a church setting, which is Wagner. And there's lots of others. There's Liszt, there's Tchaikovsky, who at the time there was an uproar about their appropriateness for a church setting. It's exactly the same with the band that I play in, Plague of Angels. Is this debate about whether it's appropriate for a church setting? But importantly, churches and cathedrals have always been at the cutting edge of music and new music. And you go to Benjamin Britten's piece, you go all the way back to Bach. Flat and Fifths, all of that. At the time it was seen as inappropriate for a church setting, but now it's part of the canon.
Part of that's very recent church stuff, isn't it? There's a church on Lewis which has got carvings on the outside of people with exposed genitalia. So, and that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So, and you get all the grotesque figures and all this kind of stuff. Absolutely. So this interpretation of what goes on in a church is a relatively new thing, I think. It's very Victorian sort of, put clothes on the piano legs because legs are rude. Victorian values, and so we have had a little bit of this satanic panic kind of thing. Whereas, being in all seriousness, the band see it as an opportunity for engagement rather than division, and this idea of having that age range. And as you say, things change and perspectives change so much with time, and if this ends up in churches being valued and definitely pipe organs being valued in a new way, then that's absolutely great. I think there's just been some judgments about, it's metal music, therefore it's not appropriate for a religious setting, without them understanding what the performance is going to be about. So it's been a really interesting journey, and at the centre, like I said, there's all these different elements. There's about churches and the future of churches. There's valuable cultural heritage there with pipe organs, and then there's bringing these two different worlds together.
So I think I've covered everything that I was hoping to speak to you about, but it'd be great if there's any questions or, yeah.
Well, about the last point, sorry, I've only lived here for 3 weeks. Is there a Christian music industry in the UK?
Yeah.
And so how has that influenced?
Not quite as big as CCM in the States. So it's not like that. It's not established in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
In somewhere like York Minster is very, very traditional. So organ, even song, those sorts of things. But they do loads and loads of art and stuff that is really modern and cutting edge. So it's interesting. Like, this is a debate again about like, what is a sacred setting anyway? What's a religious setting? Is this a religious service? No, it isn't. So why is it wrong? But I was thinking there's something else that's interesting, which is it'd be really interesting to know what the reaction from the public was when the organ was put into York Minster, because York Minster's way older than the organ, and it'd be interesting to know whether the organ was controversial in its own right when it was put in, because that would have been a new kind of thing and a different type of music coming into a sacred setting and an old setting. But
and obviously before that it was probably a pagan site as well and a centre of community.
Yeah, I mean that's it. There's all of those kind of those things through. I was thinking there's something quite interesting about the organ anyway. The organ's chosen by churches primarily because it's awesome, right? Illiterate people are coming into a church, they don't understand, they can't read the Bible, they're only getting their religion from mass and music. That's it. Those are their two engagements with God. So the organ is chosen for its awesomeness. Yeah. So there's something interesting about that kind of like, well, what are we doing if we bring metal into this? Isn't it just a continuation of that kind of...
I think a lot of Catholicism was all based on iconography because people weren't allowed to read the Bible, and it was all
Latin, wasn't it? For years. I mean, it was only written in non-Latin languages recently. That's right.
Because it was forbidden, only the priest.
Yeah, to pick up on that, one of the things I was thinking earlier on was one thing I'm often interested in the sort of thing you're talking about, particularly in terms of sound and production and so on, is the semiotics of it, which I've noticed sometimes engineers are a bit slightly reluctant to go there with that sort of stuff, because but actually to me it's actually where the next level of understanding occurs. So when you can talk about frequencies and subtones and fundamental tones and how that relates to the sounds that you get on a technical level and things like that, but it's actually the semiotic import of that I think is really what matters as musicians and indeed as an audience, I think, personally speaking. So the link between the semiotics of the organ, and you talked about awe. I mean, we talk about awesome as in the word awesome being used correctly. In other words, something that actually fills you with awe. And of course, awe is not just a pleasant feeling. Awe is actually a slight feeling of fear.
Dread.
Dread, because you're amazed by something, but it's so overwhelming that it's also slightly fearful, or at least unsettling. You look in the night sky, and it's not just pleasant, is it? It's like, whoa, I feel pretty small now, kind of thing as well. So anyway, and so organs do that anyway, and metal, of course, has a similar quality to it in terms of this kind of awe-filling sort of noise that it wants to create, and also the spaces that they're in, and also what we associate them with. Because okay, we've got Bach, but we've also got horror films and things like that. They'll use organs, what else, and even things like, and much smaller things like harpsichord to create creepy effect. I mean, X-Files. That the music to that was often organs, wasn't it? It was there was one edition they did where the theme tune was done on an organ.
Yeah, I think the main theme tune.
Yeah, to make it spooky.
Yeah.
So there's so many things tied up in this, I think, which is to do with both the actual physical nature of the sound which you've described, but also, well, other things that might be more, I don't know, might actually be a purer thing in the way that we, as humans, as a whole, would react to, but also societal things which we pick up as we associate organs with spookiness, which is another question of why, But I don't think you'll find that out just from the frequency analysis. That's what I'm saying.
No, I think that's an interesting point, Jeff. But just back to your question, so about Christian music in the UK.
Yeah. Oh, well, so that was an easy one to answer. Sort of the bigger question I have, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't push back a little bit on the loudness argument, being with the Amplification Project.
Yeah.
Because I think that whether it's real in the sense we can measure in decibels or perceived in the sense of harmonic distortion, when you say that the loudness is what makes it in part awesome in both cases. Like, I get, yeah, and maybe I'm also feeling like pushing back a little bit because the heaviness of heavy metal, I mean, there's, I'm sure, gender studies scholars who would do a better job of sort of tackling the layers of a gender binary that get placed on top of the argument that the only thing about heavy metal that makes it heavy metal is the heaviness.
Yeah, there's other. I think it's obviously down to perception as well, and some people listen to music that I don't like listening to, which is low fidelity production, and it's a different vibe. There's not just heaviness. Lo-fi music can be, it's a different texture and it's about atmosphere. So people that listen to lo-fi black metal music, which I can't stand, it offends my ears.
But is there not
supposed
to, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Especially as a mixing engineer.
Yeah, exactly. It's about atmosphere and it's not
Is
about
there not a point that
heaviness.
the heaviness is also built into the metal people themselves? I mean, okay, you can say that people could say that heavy metal, why are we getting so fussed about a heavy metal band playing in a church? But you can see why some people might get a bit fussed about it, because there is heavy metal music that deliberately sets out to be pretty, the lyrical content and the imagery is hideous.
Absolutely.
And that's absolutely deliberate.
Yeah,
so you can see why people say, well, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
and that it makes it heavy, and that you can question whether Cannibal Corpse's depiction of a serial rapist on stage is a good thing or not, if you see what I mean. So there is sides to it, aren't there, that are actually, you could argue, are quite
100%.
problematic.
100%.
Which Cannibal Corpse song depicts a serial rapist?
Yeah, there's one that I've seen a video of it where he's actually the serial rapist. So there's no, the thing that I found problematic about it was there was no distance. So there was no critique. It was, I am the serial rapist, and everyone was dancing to it.
We do have a Cannibal Corpse expert here.
Yeah,
I'll show you the video. I'll
I'd
find
like
the
to
video.
see
My
that.
friend posted it, and I read the lyrics, and it's just literally, I am doing this now, I'm doing
You
that.
could argue it's a horror film.
It's a lot of
Well, that's the argument, except there's no distance in this.
Right.
A lot of this is cultural ignorance, isn't it? Because
There was no distance.
I've been
There
to
was
any
no.
number
This
of
is a horror
churches
film.
that,
It was
that
like,
have got
and the audience
military,
were all dancing in
you
this
know,
video, and I'm thinking, this is not very nice. You know, it's really not nice. I couldn't quite understand it.
So there's lots of churches in the UK that have got military connotations. So the local regiment has got cross flags and swords. I mean, I live in Sheffield Cathedral has got a whole bloody side chapel and stuff with swords. Well, that's not exactly a Christian approach to life, is it?
No.
So, but that's acceptable because it's been there for a long time.
Yeah.
So people are comfortable with it just because it's not changed. It's just, it's always been like. People don't even look at it.
No, you're absolutely
but
right.
because you introduce something new,
Yeah.
and you can't ignore metal because it is kind of, it's kind of in your face, isn't it? Like you can overlook a little chapel at the side of the church.
Yeah.
So I think there's some of that.
Fundamentals of the
people just
Christian
not-
religion are of course a crucifixion, which is a pretty horrendous.
As the biblical scholar in the room, I think we're being a bit too general here about what is, in the same way that we're being a bit too general about what is metal. I think that's the thing. Like there's interior conversations in a culture that we understand maybe if we're metalheads. That make us go like, I get that you would be upset by that, but for us it looks like a horror film, or we know what the signals are. There's similar. I'm not defending militarization in Christianity, by the way. That's not my type of Christianity. But I think, I think there are things about kind of heritage and semiotics and what people react to. That what's been interesting about this is things that I thought were done and dusted. Like I said to Mark when we were on Zoom, and I was like, I just thought we'd had this argument in the 90s and it was gone. You know, for it to be brought up in 2025 was like, oh really? Partly I was quite pleased that we could still be shocking as metalers. I thought we'd go. I thought we were quite establishment now, but it turns out we're still shocking. But there was something about, people kept saying, it's not about taste, didn't they? And we were like, it really is though. It really is about taste and knowledge and insider outsider conversations.
I think there's also something really interesting about because I think you've done a really good job of talking about the similarities between the power of the organ sound and the power of the heavy metal sound. But I think obviously also something that's really important in the sound itself as well as the surrounding aesthetic of metal is transgression, right? Which maybe I wouldn't want to make such a claim about organs. I don't really know the history so much. So there's maybe an interesting difference there. And then as Charlotte pointed out as well, like a lot of that transgressive stuff is about imagining what the other lot are going to think about you. So sometimes the pleasure of metal combined with the pleasure of the sort of noisy full spectrum distortion is imagining that other people can't handle it, or imagining that your parents are going to be shocked by it, or imagining that you're going to terrify a bunch of Christians.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which I think is an interesting dimension to then also think about how Christians imagine what metalheads are doing, and they're often wrong, but they're investing a bit of their own sort of self-identity in imagining what other people think of them.
I think it's a really interesting point, because they've always said the recipe for good music is when your parents don't like it.
Yeah.
And those boundaries have got pushed. It's an interesting one. In fact, a lot of people from Finland, which is just such a huge metal music fan base in Finland, is they complain that they can't rebel against their parents because the parents are massive metalheads.
Yeah, that's right. What do you do?
And that's an interesting.
Easy listening.
Yeah.
Music.
Back into Perry Como or something.
Yeah.
There's a question over here.
Hey, thanks. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about like the mixing and engineering and the kind of live sound mixing, and like I guess like genre expectations and values, because it was interesting to hear you mention like harmonic distortion fills the spectrum. It's very full, kind of like blurry sound, but then you mentioned like but the individual instruments need to cut through, and it's about sort of like mastery and control and precision, and all of those kinds of values. And it's like interesting to think as you get deeper into metal subcultures like drone or whatever, or doom, where they embrace the blurriness and it's fine to be so like where do you kind of land on that?
And that's really interesting when you say they embrace the blurriness. Like drone, it's incredibly slow and there's the space between the notes, and that's where it gets really interesting. So a lot of it is about brightness, and the harmonically distorted guitars, that's your context. You start with this wall of sound, and how do we get things to punch through that wall of sound? And so it becomes about transient design. It becomes a little bit about distortion on other elements as well, like compressing so that you get harmonic distortion, and adding punch to drums. Drum sample use in the studio is one to kind of like provide more control, because the drum samples are clean, there's no spill on them. And then, from there it becomes this idea of carving up the pieces, like literally making big cuts on the bass. And you look at many albums, and you can start hearing items in solo, and then looking at what the engineer's done. I'll give you one example. If you listen to the bass sound on Metallica's Black album, Bob Rock has just completely wiped out 650 hertz, and that sort of like pushes the instrument back into the mix, and taking that concept.
That was kind of one of the things I was going to ask about, is like when you said that you're just like slicing bits out of the guitars and the bass, do you mean cutting them or deleting them?
No, just attenuation.
Okay, cool.
So what you end up with is, if you listen to certain bands, they've actually got the faster the music, the smaller the sounds have to be. Because there's not enough space for the low frequencies. If you listen to, like, say, Behemoth's Evangeline album as one example, there's hardly any low frequencies there. It's just kind of like really, really thin, and it's because of the speed of the music. And if there's not enough space for those low frequencies to decay, it's something called inter-onset intervals, and it's the distance between musical events. And if those low frequencies haven't decayed by the next transient, it just becomes a complete blur. I didn't have a chance of it today, but I actually do a little sound demo where I take the Def Leppard snare drum and make it play a blast beat. And it's just white noise. You just hear this. And so
some of us like that, Mark.
Yes.
Yeah, that kind of sounds rad as hell. Another kind of mixing one is the two examples that you put before, the clean and distorted guitar. The distorted guitar was like visibly lower.
Yeah.
But there's more information there. Like, would that be perceptibly the same loudness, even though the waveform is smaller because of the harmonic information?
It's perceptually it sounds louder because of all the additional harmonic information.
But it's not going to like clip the track.
No, because it's more it's not compression, but it's compression.
Yeah.
It's an interesting. it's an interesting.
Because it does reduce the attack, doesn't it?
Yeah, I was going to say, it looks smaller.
Yeah, you take the initial transient and it's just really flattened and you haven't got that great dynamic range. But of course you get the sustain from it.
Yeah. Presumably you have to build back in the dynamic quality because obviously the clean guitar has a punch, automatic punch, isn't it? Because it's got a peak and then a full straight away. Whereas the sustain doesn't have. The impact actually is lost to some degree, and you're having to try and get it back with sustained power. But it's a
What it's all down to, and this is where most bands going into the studio miss this out, is you actually have to really reduce the distortion. You end up like a bee in a biscuit tin with the guitarist. The amount of distortion that guitarists expect that they need to use. There's an interview with a guitarist from a French band called Gajera, and he says it's like, and then what happens when you turn the gain down, the guitarist adopts and digs in and tries to get the bite and attack from his or her performance, and that becomes really important to the performance as well. And that's a really, really important production thing. Is they come in and they've got this bedroom tone, it's all fizzy, and you like dial it down and it's interesting.
I found with playing with a new distortion pattern guitars that some of the more extreme examples of it, you can't actually hear any pitch anymore.
No.
Playing, and it's just just constant.
It feels like the thing that you're mentioning about like the kind of experience of awe, like the insane button on a Line 6 amp. If I don't know if that's probably a way niche reference, but you press that, and if you're 9, that's gonna blow your friggin' mind, and it's gonna sound like cat, but it's gonna be like
the button's called insane.
It's like I can't. There's 4. It's like clean, crunch, metal, insane, all caps. Press that button.
Was there a shift?
No, that's a semi-optic thing.
Was there an historical shift? Because at some point, I guess it would have been, what is it? Are we talking late 70s? I don't know. Maybe it was with the new wave stuff, British heavy metal. Because there was the early heavy metal had more built-in space, didn't it? It wasn't a wall of sound so much. It was more. It came from R&B, didn't it? Which had a kind of funkier. And it had automatic spaces built into the music. It was still quite heavy, but at some point it became about a sustained noise. I don't know exactly what point.
And most people associate that slowness with heaviness. If you take a band that play incredibly fast and then they go really slow and chuggy, they associate that with heaviness. But there's so many different forms of heaviness, and myself and Jan Herbst's research have looked at. There's so many aspects. There's energy. And when you're playing very fast, there's energy that contributes to perceptually something being heavy. But then there's also imagery. You put a CD on and you see the logo or the look of the band, or your experience of live music is another one where you sort of like you see the performative gestures and you can visualize that. So there's so much more to perceiving something as heavy. And as you said, dread, that sense of dread as well. You listen to the very first metal song ever, which is generally considered as Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath. And
it's incredibly heavy still. It still sends tingles down my spine when I hear it, and his scream and although it's kind of fake, you almost feel like he is on the cross, or he say, "Where have you forsaken me?" and all this. It's like kind of real, and yet I don't think he believed, but it feels like he does at that moment.
It holds the planets that Peter Butler stole, and so it's got that classical thing. So
part of that is, that's accidentally turning Iommi using his fingertips, isn't it?
That's right.
So he tuned his guitar down, so it hurt less to play.
Absolutely.
And bang, you've got heavy metal. Because of a mechanical accident.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Holst.
It was guillotine.
War by Holst is like heavy metal for its time, isn't it? It's like it's so powerful. It's incredible.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, and same with a lot of Bach stuff. It's just so incredibly heavy.
I feel like there's an interesting thing with. I used to play a lot in schools. Like I taught guitar for a long time for Musica. Went out to schools and did a lot of that. And around Christmas every year, you go out to schools and do these little concerts. And I found that a lot of kids, when you turn the distortion on an amp, even if the volume doesn't go up, they will do this. And they are like afraid of it. And basically every Christmas 1 or 2 kids will have to leave the hall because they're crying, because they assume that the sound of distortion is harming them even though it's quieter.
Wasn't
so
your playing?
Oh no, it was but it was Deep Purple. It wasn't anything like nuts.
It's like a really metalled up "Oh Come All You Faithful."
They just didn't want us to play the Cannibal Corpse song.
I think there are bouncing frequencies against each other, so psychologically it can be unsettling. It is unsettling, perhaps if you've not used to it.
Absolutely,
it sets up
I can see it.
emotional resonances.
Okay, one more.
Yes, this is a part 2 of my earlier question.
Sorry.
Just thinking about like, so you mentioned like the adaptations you do for the live mixing is like amp simulation or amp boxes rather than actual amps, IEMs instead of onstage monitoring. There's like an interesting on the topic of like dread and awe in the church and the organ, like the traditionally like virtuosic like metal performer has to like relinquish some of their like control and mastery or like masculinity a bit and kind of like let go to the bigger power of like the performance context.
Yeah.
Do you think that's what you're going for or exploring?
You hit on a really interesting thing there, is everybody thinks metal music is about loudness, and we're doing the exact opposite. If you were to stand on the stage with no amplification, you're going to hear drums that sound like he's playing Tupperware tubs, and you're just going to hear just a clean electric guitar. You're not going to hear anything on stage. So it's sort of like the polar opposite, and that provides the control to the front of house engineer to be able to, and that is an interesting point you raise. Yeah, it's completely the opposite of.
Speaking of relinquishing control, right,
You're taking it.
Yes, it's 11:45,
and
a lot of people are probably feeling some heavy, powerful hunger. So if you're headed to the canteen,
if anybody wants to come for a coffee or a bite to eat, it'd be lovely to carry on.
I'll be over in about 10-15 minutes. I will come. Just got to sort something.
So please join me in giving Mark a round of
Thank you. Thank you, Eric.
It's a really interesting point about that. I don't know whether you
I love that you got extra publicity from the controversy, because that was kind of your advice to me when I got like in the Guardian. Somebody made me okay, look at him wasting our money on the research. You were like,
what's your
something along those lines.
So he does live.
No, that's great.
Yeah, this thing considered.
Rock in Hemsley is American. He just does the rock country. But his whole thing. Because obviously you can get much cleaner, better sound with a megaphone and so, but everything, all the process.
Oh, maybe I wouldn't rule it out. Yeah, we can combine knowledge. Yeah, I mean it will be interesting to see if a process turns up. They've
all their lives,
but it's been a few months now. They will have like.
Aren't they going to be? To say I know Ray Jose today. He goes, and he just said, I can do everything.
The GQ News one was hilarious because they clearly had the guy, the press release from York Minster. Like he was just like in some band. That's all.
Which is it's about control. They've lost their agency.
And I think something really interesting. What they of them, aren't there? But anyway, set up this sort of idea that Christianity was so long. Right, when they had on is a particular
the setting. Yeah, the funny thing that's the story.
So in other words,
the idea that I'll just get rid of all that.
I went down a bit of a rabbit hole of looking at who she was. Interestingly, she has this like,
but I mean, I think it is gradually shifting that way.
So then she's like, this is.
I mean, not it won't just in smaller clubs, but
of like the destruction of York Minster.
They realise they can get this incredible power from York Minster.
But it's sort of like a trade-off of like giving up
and they were sort of going like, well,
for different kinds of components. You can see the stuff with computers and simulation and they also need like well, now I have more options and I can tinker over it. It's like trading one time.
Yeah, it doesn't necessarily solve. No,
it can be a bit. I guess. So there's all that happening every day anyway. It's like
too many options.
Well, I mean that's been a problem with the digital where it's like really got worse. It is either this or trying stuff out. And never actually doing anything because you can. Whereas in the past you had that like it and that bit. Okay, there's only so many settings. I'm now stuck with that. That's it.
Forces you to get on the actual composers.
And they would never get someone like me on stage if they things I say in my blog because
they focus a lot on like coding guitar there's a joke in there.
The songs are pretty violent.
Yeah.
They sound very good.
So,
It's like nobody wants to hear.
Like it's just go like my research is in like electronic dance music. So I was looking at 90s to
That's like they can get away.
kind of stuff.
Cool.
And seeing like how this performances to try and fit in. They were obviously electronic stuff as well.
Yeah.
So it kind of depends like the playing style like is adapted.
But it'd be interesting if they have like
kind of
their outrageous made to stoke it over and over again and keep it going to the end of April.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like the subgenre in general. So looking at like
I know.
that kind of stuff.
Do we need to go with a sense
Got a lot
big
of
sentence
to do with like
to
cinema and things like that. So looking at how they adapt. There's a lot of like British bands that were very well known and things like that. Yeah.
Nice. This is for a PhD?
Yeah, I'm doing a PhD.
Did you just start or?
I'm my second year now.
Is Mark your supervisor?
Yeah.
Oh, awesome. I can't wait to read about it.
What are you studying?
I'm on the amplification project. I'm one of the new members working with Steve. Really enjoying this. But I'm like mostly like a bass guy. That's what my thesis was about. But I work in electronic music. I'm probably going to write a paper on like the history of the subs.
Always format. It's always
The
reliable.
bass culture of like having big subs in your car and like how like subs used to be like furniture, like you buy a massive coffee table and hidden underneath the wall as a giant
I think it would be funny if I'd been invited just because she doesn't recognise me as a great
I'm interested in other stuff like kind of subs and bass and like the tactile perception of like deaf culture and like you might have heard of like Deaf Raves in the UK, it's a pretty big organisation. And there's all these like increasingly like cheap gadgets you can buy to like wear as like a backpack on your chest or your wrist that like does like the tactile bass and time with your music. I'm interested in that kind of stuff as well. So
Like bass was kind of like culture, like the whole rave culture was based on like how much you could feel the bass and like you could like destroy people's ears with it and stuff like that.
Well, and actually sometimes like a marker of a good gig and a good sound system is you go home at the end of the night and your ears aren't ringing because it was all in your chest and you just have to tone the highs down because they don't care about that as much.
It's much more focused on like a bass and like how you can feel it rather than say like you go from that way and it's like your ears are destroyed because they just try and cram as much like frequency as they can in like one group.
Yeah, that's what I enjoy about like being in a church and hearing something like it's like my ears aren't going to ring at the end, but I still got that awesome like overwhelming like kind of body experience.
And also the Christian imagining what's
all going like fully still the room, but then you still had like the band system.
Where's Huddersfield Town Hall?
Some of it is the organising thing,
in the Sussex. It's basically like it's
it's nearby.
Yeah.
Cool. On the topic of new metal, so I did my PhD at Bristol.
Oh yeah.
And a friend just finished his PhD on dubstep. I guess history of dubstep. He kind of compares the evolution of